Hey, welcome in. Welcome in. Getting this live stream thing kicked off here. I'm going to go ahead and try and do these somewhat regularly as we get started into this new year of 2025. If you haven't seen a recent video, I had an opportunity to get a review done on the GoStream deck. What do they call it? The Deck Link Duet, I believe. So I've actually got it right over here. Kind of cool. It's a pretty sweet little rig, and it gives me the opportunity to be able to do live streams like this and participate in the greatness that we've been teaching about. Most of you guys are broadcasting, somewhere along the lines for either a church or a venue or maybe sporting events. So anyway, I just want to take an opportunity to get together, utilize this gear, utilize the technology that we live in today, and be able to answer questions, help you guys out a little bit further. So that's kind of my hope. That's my goal. I see a couple folks getting in. Hey, as you're coming in, let me know in the chat there. Just let me know where you're dialing in from. I say dialing in. I'm usually teaching some software geekiness for data scientists during the day. That's my day job. This is not my day job. I love doing this stuff. It's my passion project, doing audio things. But let me know in the comment section where you are dialing in from. But what I wanted to do today, just as a quick kickoff, we've got a lot of people that have picked up the X32, possibly the M32, but most likely the X32, because we saw the prices drop, right? Before the Behringer Wing release that came out kind of August time, but we saw some prices drop on the Behringer X32, and we've got a bunch of new folks that are on that console. Now, while I don't exclusively teach on the X32, I do have a bunch of videos and content about the X32, and that's where most of the subscriber base is right now, is the X32. So I figured today, just kind of first kickoff here for broadcasting live, I would go ahead and take an opportunity to talk about these best practices and some of the questions that we got to answer before we can dive into kind of our next steps. So I'll get into that in a minute. That's kind of a little primer for what we're going to be doing. I see some folks checking in here. Denmark, welcome from Denmark. Florida, Houston, awesome. That is fantastic. So welcome in. We got worldwide people coming in here on a Monday. So welcome in to everybody. Is that Ireland? When I plug my laptop in, it makes my screen resolution really small, and I'm 46 now, and I can't necessarily see all the little things. I should adjust that. But anyway, so here's what I want to do. Let me know also, how long have you been, what console are you on, and how long have you been mixing? There's some fun little info to see as well. So what console are you mixing on, and how long have you been mixing? Check down here and see what people toss into the chat. But the goal here today is to talk a little bit about this kind of getting started with broadcast. So a lot of folks are able to kind of plug the console in. If you're replacing an analog console or maybe an older model digital board, we've got the plugins, we kind of get the connectivity. We get into some routing challenges, and maybe I'll do a stream later on where we can talk about routing, because that is also a pretty big hang up for folks. But we want to talk today about just that best practice approach for what are the questions you need to ask or answer before you start to build your live stream approach, your broadcast audio approach. So the biggest question I think we need to cover, that I cover with people when they come in and look to get support from me, is they come in and we've got to figure out how many people do they have available, mix engineers, at any given event, right? If you're like my church, so most of my broadcast audio is handled at my church. I just mixed yesterday, and I was actually pretty proud of my mix. Go back and evaluate your mixes, by the way. That's a pro tip for you. But at my church, my main venue that I broadcast from, we have one sound technician on any given event. And so because of that, we've got to handle that one console is doing front of house mix. It's doing broadcast. It's handling monitors. Now, luckily, I don't have to be a monitor engineer. I let the people on stage handle that. But we've got one sound technician. Well, why is that important to figure out? If we've got one sound technician, then we need to have one console. It's going to be a little bit more complicated if we try to utilize a DAW for mixing. Although there are some ways to do it, I'll say it's just a bit more complicated. And so what I figure is best is using the standard post fader mix bus. Now, we're going to get into the console discussion a little bit. And do you go matrix? Do you go post fader mix bus? We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But I do see some comments coming in, people responding to what console you're mixing on, as well as how long you've been mixing. So I'm going to take a peek over there. Keep your questions and thoughts coming. Let's see here. X32, about 5 years. Allen and Heath and Digico for about 12 years. Awesome. X32 mainly, 8 years. Awesome. LS9, yeah, man, you ran the original. That was like the OG digital desk that everybody was running. Running Dante. That's awesome. Yeah, so there's so many different ways and things that we can apply where we're going to talk about the X32 today, just spoiler alert. But again, that's kind of the majority of where people are at. But these principles are the same. You've got to answer these same questions no matter what console you're on. You've got to figure out this approach for live streaming. So if you've got one person, we've got to do it all in the same desk that we're running front of house in. If we're doing it with more than one person, let's say 2 people, well, you've got that luxury then. You can have one console for front of house and maybe monitors. You can have a different console for broadcast. Maybe you do decide to run a DAW and just have your separate engineer set up on a DAW. That's kind of the desired way to run it nowadays. But once we figure out how many engineers we've got, then we want to think about the console approach. So let's segment it right now and just say we've got one sound engineer, like myself, one sound engineer on any given event. So we need to make it reserved to just the desk right now, just the one console. I've got my personal X32 compact right here. It's linked up to my laptop. So if it makes sense to, we can kind of plug into X32 Edit and look at the console. I currently don't have a camera set up over top. I'm just trying to get this one set up and functional right now. But anyway, if we stick inside of the console itself, there are 2 main ways to do this. I'll say 3. We'll say 3. I'm going to start with the first one, but I'm going to quickly rule it out, all right? So the first one is build your main mix and just copy that mix and direct it both to your front of house as well as out of the console, okay? I've got a video that's a very popular video. I made it back in early 2020, back in the COVID days. I don't think I can say that on YouTube anymore, but anyway, back in 2020, there were a lot of people trying to figure out, we can't have anybody in our space. How do we get our audio to broadcast and out to our people that want to watch it? So I just took my phone and I set up over top of my console in the basement, and I made a quick video about how to take your front of house mix, copy it, and send that out to your broadcast. It's got a huge response now because it's kind of the quickest way to build a mix or get your audio out. However, do I think it's the best? No, and here's why. That mix, your front of house mix, is built for your house. So your EQing, your the tendencies in the room, all of that stuff, and your PA are going to impact how you mix for that space. And while it's a good first step to just take that audio, get it into some streaming platform and send it out, it is, in my opinion, my personal opinion, you can blow me up in the comments, that's fine, but my personal opinion is that it is not the best mix to send out to your broadcast, okay? What do I think is better? I think we want to craft 2 mixes. one for front of house, and then one that goes anywhere else, broadcasting outside of your house mix, okay? I think that because that gives us a level playing field, we can use our virtual sound check and any multi-tracks that we can record, and we can really dial in what we want that sound to be. We can craft the compression, the limiting, all of the EQing. We can kind of treat it like mastering a track, if you will, and we can send that out of the console and out to our broadcast. So that's kind of my go-to, is to build two mixes, right? One for front of house and then one for broadcast. Now, once we get into the console, we've got this approach, and we've got one sound engineer. We've agreed upon that for right now. And we've got one console, and we're going to build two mixes. There's two ways to do it now. We've ruled out the first one, which is just copying the house mix. Let's go to the other two. Those are post-fader mix bus or a matrix, okay? Before we talk about those, the post-fader mix bus I'm going to talk about first. I see people tossing some comments, so let me just check over there and see what we've got here. People still asking about, or answering, I should say, talking about how long they've been mixing and what console they're on. Let's see here. Somebody's saying pre-fade to vMix, post-fade Reaper for multi-tracks. Cool. It's awesome. One of the things you're going to figure out about this audio thing is that there's so many different ways to kind of slice and dice what you want to do, so many ways to get it done, right? And so with that in mind, let's talk about the post-fader mix bus concept. What this says is we're going to build our house mix and have that functioning great. We want our house mix to be dialed in. We want our faders to be set up and at the levels that we want them at. And then after we build and get our front of house mix good, then we build a post-fader mix bus. Post-fader meaning it's going to follow any fader moves that we make. So what I'm going to do real quick is pull up X32 Edit, actually. And let's see, give me a second here. And should be, if I push, let's see. We want to go here, flip over to that, and then I should be able to pull myself down right there. Hi, still here. Anyway, we're looking at X32 Edit. This is hooked up to my console right now. And post-fader mix bus, if you're not familiar with X32 Edit and you mix on the X32 or the M32, I recommend getting comfortable with it. It's a great piece of software. It's got a lot of features that are a little quicker to punch around through than maybe on the desk itself. But it's just a great secondary resource that you can work with. The way that this works, just a quick little version. We're looking right now at all of our inputs here. However, over here on the right, you see this fader right here. I'm going to move up and down. That is a DCA, so the DCAs 1 through 8. And if we look on the far left, you'll be able to see that because we've got 1 through 16, and then it says DCA, 17 to 32 in DCA. These are little quick buttons that show you all of your faders. So that's all 32 inputs, that's 17 to 32, so on and so forth. How do I know we're looking at the main mix? If we look on the far right, way over on the right, over there we've got main LR is highlighted. And then below that are the buses. So this is my console setup that we use at my church. The first 6 buses here are set as pre-fader buses. These feed in-ear monitors for everybody on stage. Everybody on stage uses their phones to connect to an internal network that controls the board. They mix their own monitors from their phones, and we don't have to be a monitor engineer to do that for them, which is kind of nice. But down below that, bus 7 and 8, that's a drum bus that I've got. 9 and 10 is a band bus, and then 11 and 12 way down here, might be hard to see, but 11 and 12 way down here, that is my broadcast mix. It's post fader. What does that mean? What that means is that I can use my faders that are over on the left to build a mix to go into that bus. And it's going to be a portion, a fraction, if you will, of whatever's being sent to my house. So if I click on this button, you're going to see the faders on the left are going to switch. There they go. Now they look different. And that's the amount of each input that's going into my bus to get sent to my broadcast. That can be really confusing. What is a bus, you ask? I always explain a bus is like this. If you think about kids going to school, here in the States we have big yellow school buses that drive around to different stops or locations and pick kids up from neighborhoods and so on and so forth, get them to a school. Well, each kid looks different, has a different lunch, different backpack, right? They all sound a little different, talk a little different, but they all get on the school bus and they go to the same location. And that's what we've got here with a bus. It takes all of our inputs, which are different, kick drum, snare drum, guitar, vocal. They all look different and sound different, but we send them to a bus so that they go to a specific location. Okay? So pre-fader means that when I'm looking at the main left and right, so this is my house mix, if I turn vocal 3 up, that fader movement doesn't impact any buses that are pre-fader, like my in-ear monitors. So any change I make in my mix doesn't change what goes to my in-ear monitors. That would be horrible for them, by the way. However, in my live stream, in my broadcast mix, this bus 11 and 12 over here on the right, if I turn up vocal 3 in my house, it also follows and turns that up in my broadcast mix. What that saves me from having to do is turn it up here and then go over into my bus and then turn it up over there. And then I come back and now my keys are too loud. So I turn them down in the house and then I go over to my bus and I turn it. It's too much jumping around. So using a post-fader mix bus gives us that capability to raise up or raise down as we're mixing. But that's why it's so important to have your house mix set within reason. You're going to have a vocal that's going to move up or down. You're going to have guitars that move up or down. But your faders, for the most part, are set at a pretty good level. All right, so we're going to not just copy the main mix and send that out. That's not a bad start, but once you get people in your rooms post-2020, we want to be able to have 2 mixes. That's, again, my preference. That's just me. Now, the next thing we can do, we've got a post-fader mix bus that we've talked about, and I've got plenty of videos about that. However, the next thing we could do is run a matrix. Well, what's a matrix? A matrix is a mix of buses. Okay, so we take inputs and we mix inputs into a bus. We build multiple buses. We can now mix those buses into a matrix. So how do we use that? Let me actually load a scene real quick. I'm going to come back over here to you guys. So I'm going to look and see if there's any comments in the comment section. Give me just a minute here. Find the old interwebs again. That is not the one I'm looking for. All right, let's see what people are saying. I gotta zoom in. I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna zoom in. Don't tell my kids, they will forever just rag on me. Okay. Hey, ooh, okay, that's aggressive. Not 200%. I'm not that blind. All right, let's see. Some people, I run a pre-fader bus mix that goes out to a pair of matrices. Says Daniel, that's cool. Pre-fader bus mix. So pre-fader bus mix could be used in a different scenario when you've got 2 different sound engineers. One that's managing the house, and then one that can take all those inputs pre-fader and build a mix separate for broadcast. So that's cool. We've got somebody else here, Pedro's asking a question. Maybe we'll get to that at the end about dealing with distortion on the live stream broadcast. Francis helping out, that's cool. Which is better, pre or post fader with one person? So Otis, that's a great question. He's asking which one is better, if you've got one person mixing, right? Yep. And again, that answer is this. If I run pre-fader, let me just push a button on my camera real quick because it's going to time out. There we go. If I run pre-fader, then I have to make the same change. If I turn a vocal up, I've got to make that same change in the other, in the other mix. So instead, what I want to do is run post fader with one person, because that gives me that capability to make one move and it copies it or follows it, if you will, to my other mix. So that's my desired way to go with only one engineer. So let me jump back over to X32 Edit, and we're going to talk about a matrix. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to load, let's see here, we'll just show you guys this process. Another pro tip here is to get a blank scene saved on your console. So if I come into scenes, and I've got random scenes that are on this console here, blank is my first one. And if I just load that one, it's kind of a fresh, even scene. You're going to see everything kind of replicate down and null out. You see all the little thingies moving. Kind of cool. So this is just a fresh, clean scene. I can always get back to my other scene because save your scenes, people. It's the right thing to do. So at a blank scene here, what I have is, let's talk about this matrix. If I wanted to run a matrix mix or a mix of buses for my broadcast, I would first come down and choose which matrix I want to use. So watching this here, I can come down to the bus matrix level. If you're on the full console, it's on the right-hand side to find your matrices. So this is all of our mix buses. We've got effects racks, and then here, matrix 1 and 2. So this is what I would do. I would quickly come in here. I would go to config. I would link matrix 1 and 2. And then I can pull these up to 0. It's an ideal place to be. You could rename this if you wanted to. I'll just say stream left and stream right. Okay, so we've identified these. Maybe we change the color of them because we don't want people to touch them. Now, what goes into this matrix? Well, we want to come down here to our buses and build some buses. Typically, what you're going to have is, let's stereo link the first one. I'm going to change the color on these just to make it a little bit easier to talk through. So I'm going to make this one is going to be green. All right, that's going to be our vocals. And so I'll just call it Vox. There we go, and Vox. So maybe you've got a bus for vocals. Then the next one, let's link it first. Boom, boom. Bring this up. So we've got vocals. We're going to need to have a band, right? And so this one's going to be band. Let's change that color to be purple. Seems fun. Okay, and then maybe drums. Now you could set up as many various different buses as you want, but this is kind of the concept here. I'll just make drums yellow. Let's just know that those are drums there. All right, so we've got drums, our band, and then we've got our vocals. So with that, we would then go to our inputs up here, 1 to 16, and we would start to, you might have whatever your, I'm going to do this over on console real quick because it's easier. All right, there we go. If that's our mix, oh, there we go. Find the camera. Hey. If that's our mix for our front of house, it kind of doesn't matter necessarily. We would want these buses to be typically pre-fader, but that's kind of up to you. You can go post-fader into your buses. That's a whole bigger discussion. But I'm going to come over here and just say, I'm going to put my vocals, all of them, if these are my vocals. So 100% is being copied into this bus, okay? And then my band, let's say that is these guys over here. These are all band. It'd be a whole lot easier to just do this on the board. But let's say that these are the band. So they're going to go into the band bus, and then drums are the first couple over here, Okay, so I've got drums and then band and then vocals on my board. Do notice how these faders have the different colors that highlight around them depending on the color of the bus that you've selected. So my band is purple, my drums are yellow. You see those light up. That's just an easy thing to help you reference what you're doing. So we've built a mix which at Unity is taking 100% copy if we say that it's post fader, 100% copy of our house mix into our buses. But here's what we get to do. We get to mix those buses into our matrix. How do we do that? Great question. We can come down here to our bus level, and if I click on vocals, this is much easier on the console, by the way, but if I click on vocals and go to send, I then have the capability, here's our live stream matrix 1 and 2, they're red, and now I can turn up how much of those buses do we want to go into our mix. So maybe we want our vocals here, and then if I click on band, I can turn the band up to unity or just below unity. Maybe we want drums all the way up. I don't know. And so now we've got the capability to determine how much of each bus goes into our matrix. So when it comes down to mixing your broadcast now, if you just need to turn your drums down because they're just so loud, then you just turn down a little bit of the drum bus that goes into our matrix. Now, then you get into what's the tap point. Look right up here. Here's the tap point up here. I wish I could zoom in. I don't have that capability on this computer, but they are being fed post fader. Why is that important? Well, if we turn the drums down here, the drum bus down, then that will in turn turn down the drums that go into the matrix and out to your broadcast. So you're not having to fight with individual inputs. In fact, you now have groups that you can adjust to go into or your broadcast and then send your broadcast out. So with just one engineer, you get to think about, do I want to run the post fader mix bus? Okay, so you're just kind of dealing with all of the inputs. You don't have that grouping concept. Sorry, let me get back there. All of your inputs, and you move one up or down, and it follows your movements into your bus and then out to your broadcast. Again, that's my method. The reason I don't do the other method is because I don't have a vocal bus. I don't have the availability for a vocal bus. I'm not saying that that's how I would end up going anyway. I've trained all of my team already on the current setup, but I've got a drum bus and I've got a band bus. And actually, my drum bus is just for my house so that I can manage my drums independently in the house where I don't have to deal with stuff messing up the stream if I want to make some small adjustments. Same thing with the band as well. So that's a little bit of my philosophy for mixing with one engineer. Here's what I want to do. I want to take a quick pause and check. I'm going to come back to my camera. There we go. And take me off a double screen. I was trying to check any comments or questions that people have coming through. So give me a second to find that. Somewhere in here. There we go. All right, awesome. I don't see any brand new questions coming in, so that's fine. We'll keep rolling then. Now, if we talk about how we might want to mix with two engineers, well now, again, there's kind of, I would say, three main ways you could approach it. The first one being what somebody had mentioned in the comments section already, where we can have the one console, we can have the bus set up, but instead of running post fader, it's now pre-fader. And you can have somebody with an iPad. We do this, I do this sometimes at my church, unbeknownst to my mix engineer, but I can plug in a in-ear monitor setup from my broadcast machine, and I can sit up in a different part of the venue, have my headphones or my in-ears in. Typically I'm just running my cans, and I've got an iPad, and I can mix the broadcast or adjust the broadcast remotely without impacting the front of house engineer. I do this honestly for my younger engineers, So if they're just getting used to how to mix and how to, they're just dealing with the house right now, then I can sit up remotely somewhere else and just make sure that the broadcast is tidy. It's still not a pre-fader setup, although that would be ideal. But it just gives me a little bit of extra control to manage pad volume or electric guitar, or something like that. Whatever's needed in that broadcast mix, it's a little bit more forgiving to mix the house than it is broadcast. And so anyway, that's just a little something I do. But you can do that, remotely with an iPad or a laptop. If you've got X32 Edit and you're on the same network, then you can control the board remotely. So that's the one way that you can do it with two engineers. Have one mixing front of house, one just remotely mixing on a bus mix. You could do the same thing with a matrix and just give them control. There's no problem with doing that. But the bigger thing you can do with a second engineer is go to a DAW. Now, a lot of people historically would move to a second console. So they'd have a console for front of house, and then they would have a secondary console that they were running for their broadcast mix. That's cool. It's expensive, but it's cool. You can do that. You've got to have people that know how to run the console, and you got to understand that your gain is run by whichever preamp is, being plugged in or hit first. The other one only has digital trim and not true gain. But you can have two consoles. If you got the budget, you can do it. And hey, with the inexpensiveness of these X32s nowadays, you can, maybe that's a good route to go. Just run a Cat5 in between each of them, and then you're good to go. But what about this way? You've got your mix, and you've got USB coming out of the console, and you go into a DAW. You run into a DAW, and you've got tracks that then come directly from the preamp right into your DAW, which is a digital audio workstation. If you're not familiar with that term, it's a piece of software on a computer that allows you to pretty much have a little sound console. We use it for recording mostly, but you can have a sound console that works in conjunction with your actual soundboard, but it's all in your laptop. So you get your inputs from the inputs from the console coming into your laptop, into the software, and then you've got plugins, compression, EQ. Don't forget to set your gain because it might not look like what you expect coming into the DAW. But EQ, compression, maybe you've got now the luxury of multi-band compression. That would be really nice. Maybe you've got a distressor, maybe you've got some nice reverbs and delays that don't take up then what's built into the X32. And that lets the X32 just run fully, or your main console fully, for front of house. And your secondary person gets to make all their mixing decisions right there in the console. And so, right there, in the DAW. And so that's a pretty sweet little setup because many people have laptops. The laptop that I'm running right now is a really old laptop. It's a 2012 MacBook Pro. Yes, it did not die with all of the other dinosaurs. This thing is a workhorse. It's amazing. But older machine, and it still works great. And I could use this computer, which you can probably find people giving these away online. But you don't have to have anything fancy. It's just going to run a pretty thin DAW. And then if you wanted to buy a DAW, you get into picking. A lot of people run Reaper, which is relatively inexpensive. I run Studio One Pro, not sponsored, but I run Studio One Pro. I've run it for, almost 15 years now. And that's just my DAW of choice. But you can pick a DAW. A lot of people run Logic Pro or Ableton or whatever you want. Run your inputs into it. The plugins that are in that software are a great starting point, and you can build your mix. And here's something cool. You can build a template. You can go home, you can multi-track record a rehearsal or a service. You can go home. You can put on your headphones, your studio cans. I've got mine right here, my cans. And you can put these on, and you can start to dial in EQ and compression settings for all of your inputs. And you can build buses and groups and effects and all this stuff, and then you can save it. And when you go to your next event, all you do is load up that template, take your inputs right from the console, You might have to make some small adjustments on gain. However, the hard work and heavy lifting is done. You did that at home in your leisure time. Don't watch the next football. Well, I guess the next football game, I think, is the Super Bowl. I'm not really a sports guy that much, but I think that's the next big American game. So anyway, yeah, take a little time during the week and dial this stuff in. And then you've got this great template that you can just bump in your inputs at your next event, and then you can run a mix. Now you've got to get that mix out of your DAW and to your streaming platform or device. And I've got a video that I'll come back and link in the video description here. It's not there right now, but it talks about going from your console to your DAW and back. Now, why would you want to go from the console with your signals to the DAW and then back to the console? Well, here's why. Many people start out running one sound engineer, and they build their mix in a post-fader mix bus or a matrix like we've talked about already. And then what they want to do is they want to expand, and they get somebody, a young kid or seasoned professional, and they give them a DAW and they give them the inputs, and they come in and they say, all right, we're ready to now expand, but we don't want to have to try and, we just want to mix in the console. Sorry, we want to mix in the DAW, but all of our cabling and connections are still set up to the console the way we were. So all we're going to do is send the signals to the DAW. We're going to build that mix. We're going to send our mix back across USB, back into our console, and then out to our streaming device. So whether that's going to your camera, straight to an ATEM Mini, or another small platform like this GoStream that I've got here, or maybe you're running into a bigger video switcher. Whatever you're doing, you can add that DAW in, and it just becomes an intermediary point to build your mix and craft your mix. So that's a couple of just ideas of how we can do this. But right now, the biggest question you need to answer for yourself is going to be, how many engineers do I get to mix at any given event? So that is kind of my big starting question. And then from there, it just kind of trickles down to help make those decisions. So if you've got questions, toss them in the chat right now. If you're watching this video after the live event, you can go ahead and put those in the comment section down below. I'm always answering questions down there as well. But I'm going to take a peek at the questions or comments that have come in over here. Let's see what we've got. Otis says, how do you output matrix to XLR outputs or via Dante card out into streaming PC? We'll look at that in a minute just in the console. Dante, I actually don't have Dante access, but I know you would go into the Dante software and make those settings there. Another question here says, I usually mix by making a mix by channel faders. I think that's using Senzon faders. And after that, mix by DCAs. Okay. Will a DCA change or affect a post-fader mix for stream mix? All right, so this person, Perlarson, I can't read the name, but whoever asked about the DCA question, yes, your DCAs will impact your faders, and if your mix is a post-fader mix bus, then it will effectively remotely change or control those faders, and therefore it will adjust. I'm going to pull back up my my setup here, and I can show you that in a second. But first off, let me answer the matrix question about routing. I'm going to pull this up. There we go. Switch you guys over here. Let's take a look at this real fast. So we are in X32 Edit. We have simulated over here on the right that we've got a vocal bus, a band bus, and a drum bus. Those are feeding into a matrix 1 and 2. We want to get matrix 1 and 2 out of our console. If we're doing it here in X32 Edit, we're going to open up the routing screen. And the first thing we have to do is figure out a pair of our 16 outs that can handle our broadcast. So coming in here, this is what mine looks like by default. You've got your outputs tend to follow the the mix buses, except for whichever console you've got. If you're on the smaller platform like me, 7 and 8 will by default be dedicated for left and right. If you're on the full size console, that would be down here at 15, 16. That aside, what we need to figure out is which two do we want to send our signal out of. So in this case, we can come over here to outs, and if we're going to use XLRs, we want to choose two of these. So if I say matrix 1 and 2 is going to be right here, what that's going to do is take matrix 1 and matrix 2. It's going to send them out output 1 and 2, but then we have to tell output 1 and 2 where to go. And if I look at XLRs, we can see that we are grouped 1 through 16 just right in a row. So there's no fancy routing that we've done here. We've just used the outs 1 to 16 to determine the order of our outputs, or order of how we get our mixes out of our console. All right. Now you could do it a different route if you don't want to use XLRs and just use auxiliary outs. Let me put this back up here like it was, and we can come over here to the aux out setting. And aux out, we have a similar matrix feel, not to be confused with the matrix that we're trying to get out of the console. But if we still wanted to send this signal out, matrix 1 and 2, out auxiliary 1 and 2, then you could use the 1/4 inch cables and go out 1/4 inch to an 1/8 inch headphone jack into your streaming device. So that's another option you can do. When you get into going digital, if you want to go across USB, it's a little bit different. But the question was asked, how do we get our matrix mix to go out XLRs? Okay, so we've covered that. But we were going to talk about DCAs. Let me reload my normal scene. We're going to do that here. What is this one? Crowd mics. There we go. And we'll close that. So DCA stands for digitally controlled amplifier. As this is loading up, DCA stands for digitally controlled amplifier, which means it is kind of a virtual or remote control for one or more inputs. What do I mean by that? If I look over here at my DCAs, see how this says PC? This first one here, I'm going to move it up and down. There we go. So that one above it says PC. That's my DCA1 as listed down here at the bottom. And it says PC right there. And I'm pointing at it a little bit like you can see where my finger's pointing, but try and use my mouse instead. Well, that controls my left and right PC input that are coming across auxiliaries. So when I look at that, over here on the far left, way over here on the aux ins, here's PC in 5 and 6. So that one fader is remotely controlling my DCA, or my DCA is controlling these two faders. So it's remotely controlling them. When I turn that DCA up or down, it doesn't move this physical fader, but it controls the output level of those faders. It's kind of like moving it up and down. So where this is, let's put this at 0. These are at 0. If I come over and find my DCA is all the way down, which means that effectively those faders are turned all the way down. You're not going to hear anything from that PC. Same thing with the mute. If I mute the DCA, it mutes those inputs remotely. Okay. If I turn this up to only right here, then that's the amount of level I'm going to get from those inputs, that PC input, because the DCA is keeping it at that level. You can see right here, I've got a vocal group. This vocal group controls my 3 vocals that are just to the left. It says male, female, and Vox 3. And this, if I want to turn all my vocals up, I can just move one fader up or down slightly. And that takes the whole blend up or down. I don't have to make any, I don't have to put all 3 fingers on there and move them. And think about your drums. If you just need your drums to be softer and you've got 5 or 6 mics, you don't want to try and get them and move them all down. You can just use a DCA. I've got a DCA down here for drums that will just turn my drums up or down in terms of volume level. But to answer the question, yes, your DCAs will impact your post-fader broadcast mix. if you're using either post fader sending into a bus mix for matrix, or if you're just using a broadcast mix like I am here. So that's good. So let's do this. In terms of, we've covered a bunch of content. Let me get back over here. We've covered a bunch of content in terms of kind of standard best practices and the biggest question that we need to answer. Let me just see if there's any questions and in the chat there. And then outside of that, I think I'm going to wrap up. We've been at it for almost 50 minutes, and I want to be able to do these a bit more regularly coming up. And so I may end up sending out a poll about time of day, because I know, I mean, we've got people from Ireland and Denmark in here and people from Texas. So it kind of give and take whether I'm in the East Coast. So I know East Coast time is great, but maybe not always the best time. But let's see about any questions in here. What's the best way to mix a broadcast mix, post EQ or pre-fader? So Jamal, I tend to, if you go post EQ, then you're relying on whoever is mixing to mix everything. There's not going to be a big difference between post EQ and pre-fader unless you have other effects inserted on that channel. So if you've got a de-esser, or on my vocals, I run the Ultimo compressor, or I think right now I'm running the LA2A emulation. So I have those inserted. Well, if you look at the chain, it goes like this. You've got your gain, and then you've got your EQ and compressor that are in your channel strip. And if you tap it right there, you're missing out on any inserted effects that come after that and your fader. So because of that, I try to use all of the effects on the board and dial all of my inputs in actually for my broadcast mix. And then I use them and blend them and mix them into my house. So that's something we can maybe talk about in a future live stream of how I do that. But to answer your question, I tend to go pre-fader or post-fader so that I get all of those inserted effects in there as well. Let's see here. Benjamin says, I tried using Logic for my live stream this Sunday. I decided to run a multi-track recording alongside. I noticed I could not adjust my plugins or add new plugins. Can you help me figure it out? I know almost nothing about Logic Pro, unfortunately. Now, most DAWs are pretty standard and similar. Depending on how you're setting it up, if you're recording, maybe you're not able to adjust plugins while recording. So again, go back to the discussion we had earlier about building a template. So maybe you just record raw tracks, come home, plug in some headphones, build a template with your channel strips that you want, and then you've got that ready to go for the next time around. You said, why I ask? Because when I use pre-fader, oh, this is Jamal. When you use pre-fader, you have to use the house fader to mix the live stream. That seems, Jamal, like you've got maybe not set up as pre-fader. Maybe somewhere in there you've got it tapped as post-fader, or your routing. Again, maybe your routing is just grabbing your main mix and sending your main mix out to your broadcast. Maybe you've copied your main mix to a matrix, which is kind of what I started out talking about originally, which was the first of three things that I ruled out of not wanting to do. But if you want, here's what I'll say, shameless plug. If you need one-on-one help, reach out, go to my website, which is, you can go to alamhouse.com and you can click on the sound button, and that then the contact card comes directly to me. So that's a way to get in touch with me outside of YouTube. But love to help you out with that. Awesome. Benjamin said thanks, so that's cool. So here's what I'm going to do. I want to go ahead and wrap up here. This is a good discussion, a great kind of first stream. Thank you guys for being a part of it. But if you've got questions, again, leave them in the comment section below, and that's going to give us the ability to answer your questions. If you want help outside of YouTube, you can head to my website, which again is alamhouse.com, and you can click on the sound button and then visit my contact card. That'll get directly to me, and we can start a conversation there outside of YouTube. But hey, thanks for hanging out. I'm going to leave you guys with a fun little a little meme picture that I really love. And but that's it for now. We'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.